Hello, and welcome to Live Well Long, the podcast where you learn many, many things to help you live well long, particularly in the area of health, well-being, stress reduction, and anything else, spirituality that helps you live well long. And today we have a wonderful guest. She's an advocate of capturing family stories and experiences to connect the generations and sharing words of the heart through legacy letters. As a family legacy guide, Ruthanne helps individuals glean the most important stories, experiences, and words of love to create a non-financial legacy of generational wealth. When combined with photos, they create a lasting family treasure. And as she puts it, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a picture plus the words is priceless. As some of her family members passed away, she began to realize how many family stories died with them, and how valuable the stories and words that she did have would become. After becoming a certified guided autobiography instructor in 2012, she founded Capture the Journey to help others take action and avoid the regret of waiting until it's too late. With that goal in mind, she speaks to audiences of all sizes, conducts workshops, which are also available to groups and organizations, and creates guidebooks and other resources. In addition to her legacy work, her experience over the past 30 years has included nonprofit administration, as well as volunteer leadership in a national women's organization. Advancing from the local to the regional and then to the national level of leadership, she has engaged, mentored, and trained hundreds of other women to become leaders themselves. So let's welcome our speaker, our guest on this podcast today, Ruthanne Warnick. Yay! So wonderful to have you.
Thanks so much, Alexandra. I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much.
I'm so grateful to have you. I just love knowing about you and doing this to share the work that you're doing, because I really know how vital it is. So many of us have that experience of, oh my gosh, when this person, this loved one is gone, the stories that we don't have are gone with them. And so the work that you're doing is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. How'd you get started doing this work?
So my father passed away. It's now almost exactly 28 years ago already. And I realized that when he passed away, that it wasn't just embodied, that we lost all the stories, and the stories died with him. And I realized that I had an opportunity, although I had lost the opportunity to capture many of his stories, I still had the opportunity to share my stories with him. And so it built from there. And as, of course, I lost other family members, I realized that if we're not intentional about capturing those stories and passing them on, right, and sharing them with the generations of our family, they will in fact become lost forever. And that is really what drove me to help people take action and not procrastinate about it. And most importantly, not regret that they just didn't get around to it, and then feel that profound sense of loss that I felt.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's because it's such a finality, and you can't say, oh, I'll call them tomorrow. And I meant to ask you. You can't. So tell me, how does sharing family stories and experiences benefit the well-being of the generations of the family?
It depending on what generation you're in. So for the older members of a generation, members of a family, it really gives them a sense of mattering, that their stories will, that they matter, not to the family, but also that their stories will continue to matter to the generations of the family. So that's a sense of well-being for the aging population part of your family.
Right.
For a child, the knowing your family stories, the generation, some family history, that lineage, if you will, or that thread that comes through from the great grandparents, the grandparents, the parents to the children, having that thread actually creates a sense of well-being, of belonging, of
Right.
confidence. And there have been studies that have shown that
Yeah.
where the more a child knows about their family history or their family stories, and that they feel a part of it and engaged in it, it
Mhm.
actually does create a sense of well-being for the child.
Right.
In the middle generation, we'll call it middle age, but really in the middle generation, so whether your parents are still alive or not, you have this sense of you're really the link at that point, whether your parents are still alive or they've already passed on. You're really connecting that generation through you to the next generation and the generation after that. So
Right.
I consider it almost a responsibility
Mhm.
to become that link in your family. That's how I feel about it. But we have an opportunity to become that link. So maybe responsibility is not the right word. Maybe opportunity is a better word. We have the opportunity to connect the past generations through us to future generations of our family. So that's a sense of well-being for us in that role, because we have taken action or intentionally made sure that those connections continue.
Right. It's a sense of stress relief for those of us in the middle thing. I can do this for the future generation, and feed the stories from the past forward to them. I mean, I know in the pandemic, when we were in lockdown, and there was this concern about, well, how long is this going to last? And, will I get to be with my grandchildren? And it was a big concern for me. And I started writing down things that I wanted to make sure I tell my grandchildren.
Mhm.
And it was like a warning sign, like, okay, pay attention. Maybe this lockdown is not going to be the thing that keeps you from connecting with your grandchildren, but at some point that the curtain will fall. And so you want to
Yeah.
make sure you
Right,
get those
right,
points
right, right,
across.
right.
Yeah.
And as you talk about, living well long, of course,
Right.
that is the ultimate goal, right? Is to
Right.
live long and live well while we're living long, right? But
Exactly.
we don't ever know when, I mean, there
Exactly.
are other things that are out of our control and we don't know. So are we
Yeah.
going to take action to not only make sure that we continue through the stories, excuse me, the stories,
Mhm.
the wisdom, the life lessons, just the experiences of knowing who we were, who we
Right.
are.
Right.
We just don't know when it's going to be too late. And look, I'm guilty of it myself. The not just the regret, but the procrastination, because there's always tomorrow, someday,
Right. And every
tomorrow,
day
the next
brings
day,
its
next year.
pressures.
When I have more time, someday I'm going to do that.
Right. But
It's
right now
kind of
I need
elusive.
to, do this, run this errand, or do this laundry, or whatever it is, go to that course. And yeah, it's
Mhm.
so true. It's easy to put stuff off thinking we have decades when
Right,
we don't really know.
right. We
We're
never
right
know.
now, as we're recording this, we're in the tail end where I'm located in Florida. We're in the tail end of a hurricane. It's just passed this area last night, or in the last 24 hours. And we get a tornado warning. And so you go into your safe room and you're never really sure. You're hoping it's going to go okay, pray, whatever. But it's like,
Right.
what if this is
Mhm.
it, and it's, we never.
Even if you take that as a story as part of your life, because you
Right.
live in Florida, for
Right.
someone who lives in Montana, hurricanes are not really, a concern for them. They might have others. So
Right.
just that would be part of your story specifically,
Right.
is you lived in a place that was vulnerable to tornadoes and hurricanes, and how
Mhm.
did you prepare for that? And were there times in your life where it was a pretty close call? Like those are really stories.
Right.
Sometimes we think of stories as little, anecdotes and little funny things, but sometimes it's about how you got through something, how you survived. And
Right.
Alexander, you and I were talking the other day, and you said it would be okay to bring this up, but
Mhm.
you lost your husband at a very young age,
Right.
um and it was right around Christmas time. So there was a lot that came together. You had the celebration and loss and all that. And so how would you share, if you were, let's say, writing to your children, your grandchildren, or future generations, how would you share your wisdom, your advice of how to overcome something that at the time seems, I was going to say, not overcomable. There's probably not a
Insurmountable.
real word like that,
Insurmountable.
but that it would
Yeah.
be impossible to
Right.
overcome, that you'll never get out of that place of grief and loss.
Right.
And that alone is valuable to pass on to children, grandchildren, to say how I'm going to, they're going to have things in their lives
Right.
that they're going to have to overcome. It may not be uh, as big a loss as something like losing a spouse at such a young age, but
Right.
how do you overcome that? And
Right.
I have strong family members who also have lessons to teach me from how they, things they overcame. So
Mhm.
that's what I consider to be a story as well,
Right.
like your life lessons. What could you teach someone? Or
Yeah.
it's like, really, it's like a guide for them, like, how is it something they could refer back to and say, my grandmother went through this period, or this loss, or this,
Right.
it doesn't have to be loss of life. It could be, a hurricane, a fire, it could be a job loss. I mean, there are lots of ways that we overcome things in our
Mhm.
lives, and those are really valuable
Right.
lessons. And we don't necessarily think how valuable they could be to future generations, not to for the lessons learned, but
Right.
also just to share part of the essence of who you are, right? Of
Right.
how you got through that, where you reached for support. And it really just helps share who you were and how you became who you are.
Right. It really deepens the relationship. I look back to, how letter writing was common in, the 1800s, early 1900s. That's how people kept in touch. Now we have everything is social media,
Right.
and and
I'm
there
going to
is
say
this.
letter writing was pretty common even 60 years ago. I mean, it
Yeah,
wasn't actually even that long ago,
that's true. That's true, right? Yeah, and it's a wonderful art which you are bringing back in a sense through your work, which is beautiful because
Yeah.
right now everything is so quick, 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 um, that it can really deepen the message that people leave for each other.
Mm.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just this morning, actually, I was talking with my friend Kristen, and she was telling me that she and her 14-year-old daughter were at a cemetery recently.
Hmm.
And her daughter, I think profoundly, but her daughter said to her, look at all these headstones. I wonder if we have the stories of these people,
Oh,
or are they
wow.
all forgotten and lost
Right.
forever? And,
Right.
that's pretty profound for a 14-year-old. But in
Yes.
general, if we think about that, is that, you know, our, how do we make sure that it's not lost forever?
Right.
And she just shared that with
Yeah.
me this morning. So,
Yeah, that's beautiful for her to have that awareness, for the 14-year-old to have that awareness that
right,
she could be like,
right.
mom, let's record as much as we can,
Yeah,
maybe there's
right,
a writer
right.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like getting back to the story I shared with you earlier about my husband passing away and being actually buried on Christmas Eve. Um, And I had rationalized at the time, I'm like, well, the two most extreme things that can happen in a child's life are losing a parent and, Santa Claus coming in the Christian tradition, Santa Claus coming. And in our situation, it pretty much, it happened. They came together. He passed away on the 21st, was buried on the 24th. And it was my way of rationalizing that, okay, as awful as this can be, it may be that it fell on the holidays as a way of softening the experience for the kids, not by any means wiping it away, but kind of mellowing it out.
Right.
That's how, but having the ability to see both sides of a situation or look for the silver lining, and
but what a valuable lesson that is, right? That,
yeah.
how do you maneuver that and see the beauty and the loss at the same time? So
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, so you've told me about legacy letters. What are they, and who would write them?
So a legacy letter is really an expression in your own words of something that you want to share with someone. So there are some other terms that that relate to legacy letters, like ethical wills, which I don't really prefer that term, because when I think of a will, I think of something that you leave behind.
Right.
And with legacy letters, I actually encourage people to share them now, and they also will be left behind, but not necessarily with the intention of only being shared once you've already passed away. So that's why I like legacy letters, because you're writing it now, but it also becomes part of your legacy.
Right.
So who would share them is if you have children or grandchildren, if you've had someone special, if you want to express gratitude to someone, it could be a family member, because I focus a lot on, generations of the family, but it doesn't always have to be a family member or generational in nature. It also could include, and again, this is generational, but it could include if you have living parents, writing to them, either the lessons that you've learned from them or gratitude you want to express to them. And what I think, when I think of that, I think of you're passing it up because they are still living. So you're writing it, you're sharing it, you're kind of passing it up to that generation.
Right.
But then it becomes part of your family, then you also have the opportunity to pass it down. So in the moment, you're passing it up, and it becomes something that you can pass down. So it just becomes a cherished gift that can go on and on. So they can be written for many different reasons. A lot of times they include some sort of lessons of life or wisdom. But I encourage, even though I call them legacy letters, and they can be just that simple, like literally a letter where you might include your values, your guiding principles, who you were, what, who you are, what's most important to you. But it also can include family stories, and it can include photos and become more robust. It doesn't have to, it just becomes a bigger treasure and a bigger gift if you can include those other things as well. And that's why I say, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a picture plus the words is priceless.
Yeah.
And
that's a great saying.
I work with people to say, let's not overcomplicate this. Let's think of it as a letter, just like you would write a letter, and just like we were talking about moments ago about the concept of literally writing a letter as a means of communicating back and forth with people.
Right.
And you think of it in that way, you can make it very personal, because you are writing to that person. And you could be writing, for instance, to a group of people. So you could be writing, let's say, the same letter to all of your children or to all of your grandchildren, but you're writing to them with the sense of that generation leaving it behind. It could even be, you could write a legacy letter, let's say, to a child who is getting married, and whatever you want to share with them, your hopes, your dreams, your guiding principles that maybe that they can look back on and guide them through their lives as well. Or if you have a child who's expecting a child, you could write to a baby. I mean, it really can be, it can be an expression to anyone in their life, along their life journey, or at any point in your life journey. So it's a personal expression. If I had to say it in 2 words, it's like what I want you to know.
Right. And also what I like about you saying, you know, it's something that you can do now and pass on now while you're here. The beauty of it is if someone reads it now while you're here, it can deepen the conversation. They can read it and say, well, you know, what you said about this, and then open up an entire conversation and asking more questions. And so deepens the relationship.
Exactly. You know, I recently, first of all, I wrote to each of our children when they went away to college. So I can't say for sure at the moment whether or not they found it helpful or valuable. I just knew I needed to write it, but I did know that they would carry that through lives. And even while I'm still here, they could refer back to it. And certainly when I'm gone, they could refer back to it. I have, you know, I have many examples of when, you know, when the letters could be written, but what I wanted to share most recently, I came upon a letter I had written to my daughter. Actually, I wrote it to the universe. I mean, speaking of legacy letters, I wrote this letter and it was Dear Universe. And I was to, there was something happening in my daughter's life. And I was basically saying to the universe, please let this come to be, like, let this happen. And I know that might sound a little weird.
It was a good thing.
It's a little weird, but anyway, so I was expressing like all these reasons why, you know, all of her attributes and how hard she worked. And I was, you know, going through this whole thing. So I shared it with my daughter and she said to me, wow, Mom, you really think that about me? And I was like, of course, like, you know, in your mind, you're thinking, how could you not know that? But of course, if you don't actually say it, yes, some of it is by behavior, certainly, you know, saying I love you and modeling behavior and all of that, of course. But when you can actually say it and see it in writing, it's like, it was just interesting that she said, you really feel that way? You know, think all of that about me? And, you know, I was just like, of course I do. So it was just a way for her to have that I feel like if something were to happen to me, she would always have that. And she would always know that that's how I felt about her. So it can also be affirmation of someone else. So lots of different ways.
Yeah, beautiful. I remember, and I'm pretty sure it was Irma Bombeck, the columnist from, I guess she was in the 60s. And I'm pretty sure she was the one that she wrote a letter to each child and told each one of them individually that she loved them best.
Yeah. right.
You know, you just reminded me of that when you were telling your story, you know. But it is so important to express what we can while we're still able to.
And it's hard to do. And for many people, I would even say most, but certainly for many people, it is hard to express your, you know, your innermost thoughts or how you feel about, like, you know, how you feel about, let's say, a child or a grandchild or a parent, but to express it is not always easy. So that's why the letter concept makes it approachable for people, because if I were to write you a letter and say in writing what I want to say, first of all, writing makes it easier because we can express thoughts and feelings in writing more easily than verbally. For most people, that's true, because when we're when we're more verbal about it, it's a little, I won't say superficial is not the right word, but it's we don't always reach for the inner essence of what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you sit quietly and you've dedicated a time and a space and
Right.
you're writing a letter to someone, you
Mhm.
will think more deeply. You'll think about what you want to say. So that's why I like the concept of legacy letter, because
Mhm.
it's something, first of all, everyone can relate to, writing a letter, although maybe not today's generation. I don't know.
I know. We got to catch
At
them.
least they understand what a letter is, even though they might
Right,
not have
right.
ever written one.
I've heard it said that too, that if we are literally writing with a pen or pencil in our hand, it's a much different connection to our heart than if we're
Mhm.
sitting at a keyboard.
For
And
me, I have found that to be true. I mean, some
yeah,
people won't and don't, but
right.
I have found that like there's something tactical about, the actual
Yeah,
writing.
the heart
If I'm
connection.
doing an article or a story or something, I won't say less personal, but less com less communicative maybe,
Mhm.
then, I'll sit at my computer if I'm like
Right,
typing, an article or a chapter. But when
right,
you're writing to someone, it's like you're really writing to them.
right.
Now you
Yeah,
can type it up once you've written it, and you
right.
can, I have lots of, ideas of how to present it, how to
Mhm.
format it, do you want it to be in a tangible form, in a digital form? I mean, that's that's a whole separate conversation of like, okay, I've done this, like, what do I do with it now?
Right.
But the very beginning of it is just getting those thoughts and words that you want
Yeah.
on paper.
One of the things when I was cleaning after my husband passed and I was, reorganizing, getting rid of stuff, cleaning through stuff, I found a letter in the filing cabinet that he had written. Basically it was his version of a legacy letter, obviously not through your workshop or anything.
Right.
This was 30 years ago. But I did not remember ever seeing those letters until I found them. I thought, well, maybe with all of the stress of him passing on, maybe I saw him and just filed them away and didn't register. But I really don't think. I think he wrote them and then tucked them in there so we would find. I'm not sure, but it was beautiful, and he expressed himself and his values and his regrets for not being able to make it to the end with us and like that, because
This
he
is
was young.
from
Huh?
your husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. See, now isn't that just a cherished
Oh my
gift?
God. I made
Yeah.
copies of it, made sure each of the kids got them. I hope they still have them. But I have it, so I can always make more. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's remarkable. I've had young dads
Hmm.
write to their very young children so that if
Hmm.
something happened to them, their kids would know them.
Yeah.
The beautiful story you just told. I have this letter from my dad that, he wrote before we got married. And it really can be something
Yeah.
that is can be carried
Hmm.
through your life. And when you
Right.
reread it at different times, you will hear it differently, or read it differently, process it differently,
Sure.
let's
Because
put it
we're
that
different.
way.
We keep changing. Yeah.
In your case, at one point you have different uh, levels of grief as you've progressed through your life,
Sure.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
there may be a point, there may have come a point where it was comforting to you,
Hmm.
but that only came after a point where it was painful for you. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's
Exactly.
something we can carry. And then imagine that you can now pass that on to your children and grandchildren
Right.
as his own words,
Right.
and they might not have ever known him. Met
Right.
him,
Right. And
certainly
my
not.
grandchildren ask more questions about him,
Mhm.
which is,
Yeah.
I try to paint a picture of, him as best I can for them, as besides photos, of course.
Right, right, right. And that's where you become that link that I was talking about earlier. Like
Mm-hmm.
I interchange the words responsibility and opportunity, however you
Mhm.
want to look at it. I
Right.
don't, responsibilities maybe like too negative of a
Heavy,
thought, like,
yeah.
oh, I
Like,
have
oh,
this
another thing to do.
responsibility, but you really do have an opportunity to be that link.
Yeah.
So to have your husband live on through you
Mhm.
to your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, right? So it's an
right.
opportunity either lost or one you'll take advantage of. And
Right.
so,
Right.
we always have that choice, but
Yeah.
with choice sometimes comes regret. So we have to,
We have to make the best choice we can. Yeah. I'm looking, I have a stack of my journals over the years. I have a stack of journals that I've written in over the years. And I remember I got my eye on one that when I found out I was pregnant with my first son, I remember writing in there and I
yeah,
wrote to him,
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't at the time, I didn't know it was a boy or a girl back then, it was brand new. But, I'm reminded of that I have to make sure my son gets that.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I do believe, although, I just mentioned these young dads, which were, not typically who is in, say, one of my programs or one of my workshops, but as far as the legacy letters goes, but when we get to a point, I can't say, oh, it's exactly at age 50 and a half, but there is a point in our lives where we reflect back as much, if not more so, than look ahead. So we always want to be looking ahead because we want to live in the moment. Yes, I understand all that, but I'm just saying, like, as long as there is future, then we are always thinking, what the future is. But there does come a time in our lives where we're also reflecting back. It might be reflecting on loss. It might be reflecting on our accomplishments. It might be reflecting on love, relationships. We're just reflecting about all that all that has happened in our lives that has
Right.
made us who we are.
Yeah.
And I think reflection can be a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm Jewish, and as we're recording this, we are right in between the Jewish New Year and the Yom Kippur, which is considered the Day of Atonement.
Right.
And if I had to say in a sentence, what are these days about?
Right.
They're really about reflecting back on the last year, essentially, and saying, was I the best person I could be?
Right.
What do I want to do differently in the future? So it's a time of huge reflection. Is there anything I need to atone for? And we use that word to mean, are there apologies that I need to make? Are there people I want to better connect with? Again, it's a time of reflection, and that's how I really look at stories and legacy letters, and all of that is, certainly beyond a 1 year length of time, but just sort of reflecting on, who we are, what's important to us, what are the most important stories or attributes that we want to make sure get passed on, because it's a little bit overwhelming to say, oh, my whole life story. It's really about gleaning the most important things.
Yeah, right, exactly. The highlights, the important highlights that we want to make sure we cover. So that if, some of the podcasts I've listened to, I forget which one, but they said, if there was one thing you wanted to say and put on a billboard, what would that be? Of course, that's just a one phrase thing,
Right.
but the idea of, if I only have, a few words to leave, what would it be? And obviously with the legacy letters, you get a better opportunity to
Right. You get more than 5 words, right?
You get more than 5 words. Exactly. Wow,
yeah.
beautiful.
So there's a lot to be included in the concept of sharing family stories.
Right.
And we're approaching now National Family History Month, which is immediately followed in November by National Family Stories Month.
Oh,
And of
beautiful.
course, November also includes Thanksgiving, which is,
Mhm.
time of gratitude. So for me, this is really the most um, wonderful time to really be thinking about how to capture all those family stories. Like, do we have an opportunity? We're thinking so much about family. And then, of course, depending on what holidays you celebrate, in December, it's can be very family oriented. So it's a time to
Yeah.
actually say, how can I be intentional about capturing, the stories, the lessons, whatever we want to share or what we want to make sure that we get from other family members. And
Right.
that's why I put together, I have a download, which I'll
Mhm.
mention now since it ties into this. It's 7 no-tech, low-tech ways to capture family stories starting today. And you were talking about letter writing and how much, technology we have today. It is so much easier now than it ever was.
So true.
If we focus on capturing the stories and later
Mhm.
we can figure out, okay, we've got them, what are we going to do with them? But if we
Mhm.
focus on the capturing of the stories,
Yeah.
my friend Nancy told me a story about how she and her cousin decades ago, when they were in their 20s, she and her cousin would gather up all these family photos. I'm sure they were just in these boxes, and they would go to her grandmother's apartment every weekend. And her grandmother would tell them who was in the photo and
Yeah.
where it
Yeah.
was, and they would label them all. And her
Yeah.
grandmother would tell all these wonderful stories. And
Right.
I said, did you record all those stories? Which, of course, back then was either you wrote them, you scribbled them down, or you maybe had a tape cassette recorder,
Yeah. Her reel
right?
to
So
reel.
that was it. And so I said to her, did you get those stories? And I could tell before she even answered the question, I could see from the look on her face that
Yeah.
they had not,
Yeah.
and she shared how much she regretted it. So my point in telling you that little story about Nancy is that today it is so much easier. We have smartphones, we have Zoom, we have we have email. There are so many
We can
ways
record
to
everything.
write
Yeah.
your stories, capture your stories. You can, you have photos in your phone, or you can scan photos. I mean, the technology makes it so much easier,
Right.
on the one hand. And on the other hand, because it's so accessible, we tend to not necessarily be intentional about it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so we don't think, oh, that's a story I should turn on my phone, or
Right.
if I was with a family member, I could turn on my just ask a question, kind of
Mhm.
like a prompting question, we'll call it,
Right.
and tell me about, just turn on your phone. Or if you're doing
Yeah.
Zoom, the grandkids with the grandparent, let's say, right? So have the grandchild ask a question to the
Right.
grandparent, and Zoom if they record it for you if you push the record button. I mean, how much easier
Right.
is that, right? And my father's brother is 99 years old, and I spent lots of time emailing him back and forth. I thought, okay, if I just ask him on the phone, then I have to remember what he said. So I would just email him some questions. Well, what about, can you tell me this about, grandma and grandpa, or, our great grandparents? And he would,
Yeah.
answer it in an email. So, like
Isn't
I'm
that
saying,
great? At age 99, he's
yeah,
tech
yeah, yeah.
savvy. I love
And
it. My father-in-law was too.
yeah,
Beautiful.
sharp as could be. And
Yeah.
I could still ask him questions. So you, it's just so much easier, but we still have to do it.
Yeah.
It's still not going to be magic, but in other words, it's not going to just happen because you wanted it to happen, but
Right.
it's so much easier
You have to
today.
be
And like I
intentional.
said, then putting it all together, that's, the many ideas to be simple or creative if you just focus on the capturing.
Right.
But
Yeah. When we brought my father-in-law down to Florida, because he lived in Pennsylvania, and my mother-in-law had passed years before, I kept trying to convince him to come so that I could help him. And he did finally move down. Probably, I think it was like 2014 or something like that. But we took the auto train, and when we were driving from the train station to Boca Raton, my son put his phone on the dashboard and just, hit record. And then he was just asking him all kinds of questions, which was
That's
great.
awesome.
Yeah. So while we're driving along, and I don't even know if my father-in-law realized he was being recorded, but it was great. I have to ask him to dig out that recording,
And
Yeah.
sometimes you get the best stories that way because
Yeah.
they're kind of impromptu, right? You just
Exactly.
sort of like let it rip, as they say, right? You ask a
Yeah.
question and then someone starts talking about it. And if they don't know they're being recorded, I mean, you of course should let someone know that you're recording them, but you
Yeah.
don't want to make it this uncomfortable thing like,
Right.
oh, I don't want to say that because I'm being recorded, or
Right. Right.
I'm going to interview you,
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
just ask the question and say, look, I really want to capture some story. So boom,
Yeah.
let it go.
That's great.
And yeah, it's so much easier to do now than it
Mhm.
used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So tell me, how can people get your free gift, and how can they reach you?
So they can just, if they go to capturethejourney.com,
Okay.
capturethejourney.com, you will find everything there. First of all, the free download about the 7 no-tech, low-tech ways that I just mentioned. I'll always have, if I have any upcoming workshops or any resources, I'll be launching a blog, so you'd be able to find that there. So just go to capturethejourney.com. You'll find whatever you need. And you'll also have a way to just reach out if you have some questions about capturing your family stories, or have some idea, maybe there's a tribute you want to do, or a family event coming up, like a milestone birthday, let's say, or anniversary. Just go to capturethejourney.com. You'll be able to reach me through that. It's Ruthanne at capturethejourney.com. But again, if you just go to the website, you'll find it. And speaking of tributes, years ago when my mother turned 90, here's another idea for people. We had all the children, so there were 4 of us, and then our spouses, so that was 8, and then 9 grandchildren, and we all wrote to grandma. Essentially, we wrote to her about our favorite memories and what we remember most about her.
Nice.
And we compiled them with photos with each family member and her, and we put that all together in a wonderful book and present as a gift to her. So there's lots of different creative ways
Yeah.
to create, to capture those stories and put them into a very creative presentation. Doesn't have to be that, that big of an effort or that complicated, but that was a beautiful gift that we were passing up. Remember, I talked about the passing up, but so we were passing it up to my mother for her 90th birthday, but now we're passing it down to all of the generations of the family. So,
and what a wonderful way to honor her on her birthday, to have her feel like, obviously she was probably, most of us at a certain age, we start thinking about, how long we're going to be here, et cetera. So what a wonderful way to honor her and know that, I've done good. Look at what I've left. Yeah.
So we honored her. Then when she did pass away 5 years ago, we then, I then put together a tribute to, and compiled a lot of things as a tribute to both of my parents. Nice. So, there are lots of different ways to express, to share, to capture, to honor, all of those things to connect the generations of the family. So capturethejourney.com. I would look forward to hearing from you, anyone in your audience, and just sharing the love that family stories can bring. So
beautiful. Well, thank you so much. This has been so enjoyable and sparked a lot of ideas on this side for sure. And thank you so much. I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Alexandra. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that if I've inspired, motivated, enlightened any of your audience, I hope that they will take action and avoid the regret of waiting until it's too late.
Don't miss the opportunity. Yes, indeed. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
All right. Thanks, Alexandra.